Hi and welcome. I'm Ed Saidi, and today we're going to talk about how to set up a budget home or office studio for yourselves. This video is particularly aimed at educators, teachers, lecturers, university professors, or really anyone who wants to carry out a presentation online and deliver it in the most engaging way possible. Now, when the pandemic hit, just like all of you, I was caught off guard, and being a knowledge worker, I knew that I had to do a lot of the things that I used to do physically, now digitally, and one of the most challenging aspects of that when it comes time to the work of university educators like myself is teaching. So let's go to the required setup. All right, and let's talk about our goal for today. Our goal is to talk about how could we create engaging content. So engaging online lectures, both live and recorded on a budget and by yourself. And how to be as minimalistic as possible in doing that, meaning with the use of as few extra hardware or software as possible. And we want it to be a quick and easy setup because, let's not kid ourselves, most of us don't get to have a dedicated studio. We have the same area in which we work, and our desire is to turn that area into a studio and be able to bring it back from being a studio really quick too. And we need this to be affordable, and we need to spend as little as possible. We also want it to be quality, and we don't want to sacrifice much in the way of quality in doing so and achieving all the other constraints of ours. Okay, so a little bit more background about myself. I'm an assistant professor at Norwegian Business School. That's located in Oslo, Norway. What's relevant about this video would be to perhaps talk a little bit about my online teaching style. And this is evolving, and that could tell you what you could get out of this video. First is that, as you've noticed, now I like to be on top of the slides and be able to show you my hands, be able to perhaps point at something. And, I say I'd like to be presenter on slides and not on screen necessarily, meaning to say that when I teach, and I teach a machine learning course at the business school, I'm going through a lot of coding, programming. I've come to learn that there are great times for a presenter not to want to be on the screen if you're trying to show codes, programming, if you're trying to just show a video. Oftentimes there's really no extra engagement that people can get out of you being on the screen. But when it comes time to presentation slides like these, I like to be able to at least pretend that I'm in a classroom, so to speak. I'm in front of the gaze of students. They don't need to look too far to see me. And the alternative would be something like this, which, I would think you would agree is not nearly as engaging. I'm limited to this area, and I really can't go beyond and, point to things or just seem as present. And this is the common Zoom setup that we often see. So that is why this is the preferred way. Now, also, I like to be standing, and that's because it mimics being in a classroom. It feels like I am giving as much respect to students as if I was in a classroom. I'm not sitting down, I'm not lying back, I'm not seeming disengaged myself. And the blood's flowing, and then I can describe everything well. Now, you would think that this setup is wonderful for digitally moving around the screen, or physically moving around the screen. I've noticed from my experience that that's not the thing that maximizes student interest, because in a physical classroom, you walk around because we can get the attention of the student to the right of the class or to the left of the classroom. Whereas, in a digital room, there's no such effect. The students are looking straight on at their screens. So there's no advantage to that. However, there's an advantage, surely, to being able to digitally move around your screen. So I do that by pressing some buttons on my software, which I'll explain to you how it's done. I can essentially make myself bigger and appear in the middle of a screen, or move to any of the corners and get out of the way of text or animations or what have you on my slides. So these are two, and the third is that I like to be hands-on, and hands-on on my keyboard and my mouse. And the reason for this is because I teach a predominantly programming course, and that requires typing live, that requires typing in the chat room for students, answering them. Sometimes I don't have the luxury of an assistant, of a teaching assistant. So in order to do that, I don't want to necessarily have one of these remotes that help me point and would help me click to the next slide necessarily, although that's a bonus to have, of course. My preferred place to have my hands are essentially my keyboard and my mouse, or trackpad. I wouldn't be doing any justice until I mention my sources of inspiration for conducting lectures in this engaging fashion. Prime among them is Professor Andrew Lowe of MIT School of Management, and Sean Willems and Brian Stevens of University of Tennessee's Business School, who inspired me by, after I got to watch this video that I will put a link to right below my profile, which explains this entire process, albeit in a more sophisticated manner, with more expensive equipment, generally speaking, however, explained masterfully. And it contains not only explanations of how more professional setup could be carried out, but it also explains how best to engage students online. So I'm not going to be able to do that as well as Professor Lowe. So what I'm going to focus on will be how to make it a budget setup, and to explain some extra tips that I have been able to experience and learn. And in addition to this video, which is a must watch, there's also their paper which explains their experiences in multiple classes of carrying out online learning. And I'm going to put a link to this paper as well. So make sure to check those out. My other sources of inspiration are gamers and gaming streamers on YouTube, Twitch, as well as lots of fantastic YouTube creators who have put online videos that have helped me figure out how to go about this myself. So I'm going to put a link to those great streamers and YouTube creators as well. and they have tons of fantastic content, so please watch them as well. All right, now to the most important part, which is the studio setup. So we're going to talk about the usual suspects. So that will be software, then hardware, and then how do we go about setting it all up? And finally, what are on my wish list that I don't get to demonstrate to you, but in what ways I expect they can help the engagement, they could help the teaching, and what would be their purposes. So those would be the equipment and the software that would be on my wish list. So the first two pieces of software would be no surprise to you in that a online teaching streaming software is required, like Zoom. You could use Teams as well, but I'm going to focus on Zoom here and PowerPoint, which is for you to be able to have your slides. Now, you could actually carry out all of this via just Zoom without any additional software, and of course PowerPoint. And the way to do that is you would open your Zoom, you would get into a room. So this is neat. The way we go about it in Zoom is we click on this share screen at the bottom, and instead of choosing anything in this basic tab, we go to this advanced tab. There's an option that's in beta now and hopefully will later be a fully fledged way to share one slide. And what we do is we click share here. We choose the slides that the PowerPoint we wanted, and then we find ourselves in the corner here, and now we're all of a sudden showing our slides to people. Now, you can decide, to place yourself anywhere you'd like, and you have that flexibility. You can also just go to the next slide and come back from one slide to another. And you can do all sorts of merging or removing yourself as well. But one thing you'll notice we don't have here is animation. So we weren't able to animate and see the bullet points arriving one by one. But in a lot of cases, you'll be fine with that. So consider this, that all you need is Zoom if you don't care about your animations. There is another way to go about hacking this so that you are able to replicate animations in PowerPoint and have them appear. I'll put a link to a video of a great YouTuber who explains this and how to go about it in the section below, but please do remember that that's not a full-fledged solution for having animations in your PowerPoint, having it fly, and also then you're limited to this PowerPoint environment. Another software that will allow us to take the game to another level is OBS Studio. And this is for going beyond just having ourselves in the forefront of PowerPoint and PowerPoint slides that aren't animated in their true sense of the word. And that software, being OBS Studio, is an open source software. It's a fan favorite. It's fantastic. It's what allows you to take in multiple video inputs and output a video output that combines all these different elements. Now, I'll quickly switch to OBS and show you a couple of major points, and then we'll come back. Now, this is what OBS Studio looks like. Once you install it, I'll put a link to it down below. to the software. You can install it for Mac or Windows. You then get this interface where on the one side you have your various scenes, then you have sources of those scenes. So for example, if I select this, you could see that this is coming from my webcam, Logitech webcam, and that's me, and I could potentially move myself, I could position myself back where I was, and I could readjust what's behind me as well and fix that. I could switch easily between different backgrounds, different views. I could be, at the university, in the atrium. I could be in front of some timer, a countdown during a break in class, and I could make myself disappear. And one can use various shortcuts and keyboard shortcuts to make this happen too. I've often found myself using the mouse. There's lots of properties for each of these, and of course, to set up your property given your green screen on the background, which is what I have, then you are able to set up your camera, etc. I'll put links to how to use OBS, so you'll get to see that in more detail. The key to it all is that these various inputs, they are then sent into a virtual camera, which I am shooting out now. This virtual camera becomes an input within Zoom that you can select. And essentially what you'd be showing would be, anything that's on your desktop. So this is me, this is my desktop background, and I could instead have myself in front of some document. This is an Adobe document. I could have myself in front of my Google Chrome. I can play a video and have people see. And that's just wonderful. That's what this allows me to do. I could be coding and I could be doing lots of wonderful things. So that's what OBS allows one to do. It's the key software that puts together everything else. Now, you can then combine OBS with NDI video monitor and NDI virtual input. What these would allow you to do would be to allow you to put in audio as well into and combine it with the video, so you can have and play with various audio inputs, and you can merge various audio inputs in one as well. So you could have background music to me speaking, for example. And these are add-ons that get integrated with, at times they get integrated with OBS. And for example, you get to install NDI's plugin. I'll put a link to how all this is done, but then you get these NDI output settings, and then you would bring those pieces of software in, and you would set through OBS the virtual camera to go out to NDI, and then the audio inputs to come in, and then you get a clean output from all of that. Now again, I'll put in links to how that is done, and that's more advanced than what I'm going to cover today, but I put these in parentheses as more advanced options you have. What kind of hardware does one need to be able to flawlessly or nearly flawlessly carry this out? You need a personal computer, that's a no-brainer, or a laptop. Now, it used to be that the requirements of running this and streaming at a high quality, at high definition, would be very intensive on laptops, and especially to stream it live. And it meant that most of this work was had to be done on PCs. Now laptops have gotten a lot more powerful, and so we're able to have laptops like myself running this on a 2020 MacBook M1 that allows me to run this entire operation, without resorting to very expensive computers or fancy laptops. Of course, if you have a gaming laptop, that could help you greatly. So I wrote here semi-powerful to gaming, because easily with an M1 MacBook Air, you'd be able to run this. You'd also be able to run it with previous year's Mac versions. There is one concern of noise and fan noise that is going to be probably the biggest potential issue if you use, even a Mac from 2013 or 14, which I have used with OBS as well. And there are ways to reduce sound and noise from fans as well. One way is to get a much better microphone. But then one key element is to have a green screen. And behind me here, you haven't seen it yet, but there's a green screen that allows me to appear in front of it and be able to have whatever background it is behind me. Another hardware requirement. Now, the next one is to have a high definition, or at least 720p webcam, and likely the most important piece of hardware after having a laptop is having a lavalier microphone. Now that's what you see here. And why is it so essential? There's a saying that goes that half of video is audio. The quality of the audio matters greatly, and unfortunately, inbuilt microphones in laptops and PCs are not of high enough quality, nor are they close enough to the source, that being yourself. Therefore, having microphones that can attach to yourself are going to be crucial. Now I'll talk about each one of these briefly. After you have your laptop set up, you install OBS. Then you want to have that green screen so you get a much clearer background. You can not use physical green screens and use software that eliminate the background as well, but I'll do a quick demo now so you see what the quality of that would look like. How would it compare to this? So I'm using a virtual green screen now, and as you can see, it looks fairly sharp. This particular one is called Chroma Cam, and I installed it on my Mac. I had to change the camera because it doesn't work with my Logitech webcam, but it's using the inbuilt MacBook camera. And what you can see here is I need to put a filter just like for any other green screen, for a real green screen. I'll do it here by adding a chroma key that will eliminate virtually what was there before. But what you'd see now is that, well, it's the edges of my silhouette are appearing grainy and blurry, and it's not that nice of an effect. So while you could use this kind of virtual green screen, and I've noticed it's always better in that case to keep your hands within your body so you'd have that distinguishing effect. As soon as you start moving it out, it acts up weird. But you could be a talking head like this, but it sort of makes movements and everything seem a little bit out of place. Therefore, I do encourage you to get a green screen. And all of these are budget, so the green screen I got was around $30, and it's 1.8 meters by 2.8 meters, so that's around 6 feet to 10 feet, and that's going to be within that price range. And if you're noticing now that not only because of the use of an actual green screen behind me, photo up here, but also because of the Logitech webcam I'm using now instead of the inbuilt webcam in the latest Mac, that you get a whole world of difference in sharpness. And this Logitech, I'll put a link to it down here, but it's the cheapest high quality webcam I found and read and watched lots of reviews about. So I'd encourage you to get something of this quality. The beauty of it was that it came with a nice tripod that I can use inside the package, and then I could place my webcam in a whole lot of different places. I've actually just placed it above the monitor and my extra monitor in this case. Now, we've spoke about the importance of lav mics, and this lav mic went out for around $69. Now, this one is wired. You could see the wire here, whereas, of course, if you'd want to be able to, move around freely and not be inhibited in any way, shape, or form, then you may want to get a wireless microphone. Now, that may not be as much of a budget purchase. It'll run you around $200 for a high quality one, and I'll put a link for the high quality lavalier mic that I use, which is wired, and a wireless example that I researched is one of the best ones. By the way, none of these are affiliated, so I'm not getting any sort of commission. And the quality of it matters so much. So I purposefully made sure not to go any lower on the budget on the microphone, and it's making the world a difference. Those were the pieces of hardware you must have. Now we come to the optional category. Now, an extra keyboard and mouse, and preferably them being wireless. The benefit of wireless keyboard and mouses are that you could just take him and put him wherever. You could lay him down on, any surface, build up a surface and put him wherever you'd like to stand. Have the best lighting there, have the best view. And then, so I think that's important. Now, a standard or average keyboard and mouse that's wireless is good quality would run you around, say $80. And, mine is around $350 or so, because it is Apple's original, but you do not have to buy such expensive trackpads or keyboards. I personally prefer trackpads than mouses because the click sound on mice are, so to speak, are loud. And also with keyboards, I've noticed that, as you type, that is picked up by the microphone. There's not way too much one can do to reduce it. There are videos of pro gamers who've taken their Logitech keyboards and put dampers in them to reduce the sound as they type or, play games or just go crazy while they're playing games on their keyboard, whatever combo that is. Now, it's not the greatest distraction in online teaching, I've noticed, so I think you'd be okay with the standard keyboard that's not too noisy. Perhaps test it out in the store. I find additional monitors are super helpful. You don't have to have this, so you can run everything off of one monitor. But for example, I have 2 additional normal size monitors. You could have, one widescreen, and widescreens are fantastic too for giving you that screen real estate. I like to be able to, in my Zoom videos, see the Zoom chat on one side, perhaps see the speaker view of whoever is speaking beside myself, maybe asking me a question. be able to see OBS to know what exactly is being streamed out to my students. And also with PowerPoint, to be able to see my presenter notes. Same goes with Keynote if you use that instead of PowerPoint. So there's lots of benefits to having a lot of real estate and being able to set that up with your screens. And then that brings me to the other one, which is lighting setup. I'll put up videos, links to videos that explain in fantastic detail by a US-based lecturer on how to set up the best lighting. Now, from my own experience, and this is not for, a lack of being vain, I'm as guilty as anyone likely in that category. So I find that lighting is important. It's not the most important thing. A couple of tips though when it comes to lighting. The best lighting is the one that's hitting you straight on in front of you and is natural lighting. So if you could have your desk in front of a window, that can be really helpful. Now, bar that being possible, natural lighting from the sides are okay. Just make sure that you have the right lighting so that you'd have, when you add the chroma key effect and you remove the green screen, that you don't have two distinct colors at the edge of this window, right? All along here, right? Which you can see now are quite distinct from the white on the other side, or the off-white that I've placed here. Again, the idea with off-white, check out Andrew Lowe's video. That's fantastic. Now, I find that in really sunny days, then I have to draw the blinds. Otherwise, the contrast in the background colors becomes too great. And then I must say, I found it so fascinating in the link below. You would see that just sometimes working with an umbrella would help to diffuse lighting and make you look good on both sides as well. Now to show you my setup. It's very simple. Essentially, if I remove now the virtual background, you see my green screen. And this is how I've attached it in my office to the whiteboard behind me. So it's taken no more than 4 of these connections at the top, right? And you can see the edge of my whiteboard on the side. Okay, so, I'm writing notes. I take this off and then I use it as a whiteboard. And when I'm not, then it's converted into, this green screen, and I can put that up easily. And for you to see how long it is, it comes down to this section here, and that's not very long. Now let's show you around a little bit. Okay. All right. Now this is what you can see. This is my 2 screens. And I've used books to put them up. There's a fan there, global warming, it's getting hotter these days. I have my mouse, but end of the day, I'm actually using the trackpad and my keyboard, wireless keyboard. And, you can see everything is set up here and super simply. And again, you can see the connections I have to the top. It's really important to iron your green screen. Now, as for lighting, I have one light source over there. I have one light source over here. And, it's nice when they're adjustable. And essentially, there you go. I get to put it on top here. It's very helpful to have a tripod as well. and be able to connect the camera. Now, I noticed when giving presentations, if I was going to read off of any of the notes that I'd made, that essentially it's helpful to have the webcam very close to the notes, and in PowerPoint you can't move where the notes are, but you can position your camera right next to where on the monitor the text sits. All right, now I want to show you my wish list, not because I want you to buy me gifts for Christmas, although who would say no to that? It's because these are items that I think could take this digital teaching to the next level. One would be tablet or iPad integration. So, if you have a tablet, there's a lot of institutes that do this where they would give the instructor a tablet as well with a stylus or an Apple Pencil, say, and they'd be able to draw on that there and make notes, and the notes would transfer directly on the slides or on Word or whatever document you're working on. And I think that is a really nice feature to be able to have. It probably doesn't take too much to implement. It would be potentially another input on OBS, but that would be neat. Beyond that, having a teleprompter, I think, makes a huge difference in enabling one to go to near perfection on recording videos and on keeping to the script. Teleprompters are used by presidents, by prime ministers, and I don't think there's any shame in using them, because some of the best speeches that are ever delivered are basically delivered off of teleprompters. And you could make your own teleprompter. I'll put a link to that down here. Do-it-yourself teleprompters. I'll also put a link to the tablet iPad integration, and to this third category, which would be a plexiglass. Now, plexiglasses would just be, a nice piece of glass that would be between myself and potentially the view of the camera. And you can make them into lightboards so they light up what you write with a marker on them. You often need black backdrops and a mirror and neon dry erase markers, preferably, to make what you write pop out, and so you could actually write text as if you're doing mathematical, formulas in front of a classroom. And the mirror helps so that it looks to the observer, the camera, the same way you see a text. So I'll put some videos on how to set those up, including a more budget version. I think that would be phenomenal on taking this to the next level. Also, wireless lavalier mics. So mine comes with a wire, but having a wireless one, I think for those of you who are going to professionally record a lot, and have the budget, is absolutely worth it. So being able to go grab a cup of coffee, go grab some water in between recording sessions or lectures, that's going to be huge. Also, while my green screen is attached, of course I would prefer a wheeled-on green screen, preferably one that would fold. Now, the best green screens are, in my opinion, those that are green on one side and black on the back side, so that you can implement that plexiglass lightboard solution with a black backdrop as well. And that's going to make this a lot better. Next on my wish list would be a more immersive virtual classroom. Imagine the architect scene in Matrix, where he had tons of screens around his wall. And I think for an instructor, that could be useful as long as an instructor can keep track of their own slides well too. So I'll put a link to Harvard Business School that years ago created such a room in Boston, and you'll see what I mean. I think that in addition, we'd have more rooms like that likely in the future, but then there's still something that's lost, which is, of course, interaction of students with each other. And for that, I'm really holding out for the future where we'd have virtual reality educational headsets. And yes, Mark Zuckerberg, I'm talking to you. You have these plans. Now I hope you use them for educational purposes as one of the main uses. And that would sum up essentially my wish list. Beyond that, I'd like to give you some tips and practicalities when it comes time to setting all this up. All right, now let's talk about tips and practicalities. The first one is super important, and that's for you to spotlight yourself in Zoom. So use the spotlight function, which is available once there are 3 or more participants in any Zoom meeting or room. Now, why is that? It's because now you're putting your slides as the background. They're not being share screened the way you had them before. Therefore, as soon as somebody else starts speaking, if you haven't spotlighted yourself, then students won't see the slides. It will all of a sudden go to that person's face, and there's this focus loss that you'd have because of that. So for that reason, always make sure to spotlight yourself in Zoom. And if you don't know that function, it's available once there are more than three or more people. Click on that 3 dots on the side of any video, and you can spotlight it as a host. The second one is to share content as a second screen. That's in the advanced share functions of Zoom. Let's migrate there and I'll tell you what I mean. All right, we're in Zoom right now, and I'm using OBS to show what's on my screen and have myself overlaid on top of it. But the problem that arises if you don't share content as a second screen is sometimes you have some text, and you can now see the text of the budget. So this I'm showing you as the total costs for the setup, for my setup that came just under $200 at $189. If I only include the mandatory options, and then $514 if I include the optional items as well. I have medium high estimates for the optional options, and I call this the dedicated additional costs because I assume all of you have a PowerPoint and Excel, and you could utilize the free versions of OBS Studio, Zoom, and etc. Now, what happens is that even though it looks to you as a presenter often that everything is clear, when it gets sent out and transmitted to your audience, often what ends up happening is the video quality isn't as a high quality when you've just chosen in your section here, your virtual camera. So in that case, you can go and improve it by sharing the screen, being in the Advanced tab, and clicking on Content from Second Camera. You could also decide to share your system sound natively through Zoom and share it with others. But if you share content as a second camera, I must say, then you get to see, yourself, a screen that pops out and just shows you what everyone else is seeing. But most importantly, what everybody else gets to see is a much higher quality video. So they can actually all of a sudden start reading this text that was blurry to them before. And what I'll do, you can't see that now. You can't see that the quality of the text has substantially improved. Yeah, now you could probably see it compared to what it would have been without this, which would be, a much lower quality relatively. I will take snapshots of both of these so you could see how they compare side by side. On the left, you see the normal zoom share quality, and on the right, you see the content from second camera share quality. But these two will help your Zoom experience to be much better for your students. Okay, next one is that if you are experiencing a lot of fan noise from your laptop, from your PC, you can reduce it to a great extent. I would say around 70% of the noise at times through OBS Studio. And I'll put a link to some pro gamer who does that and can help you to remove that fan noise for a much better experience, so you don't have to give up on OBS if you're having fan noise, which will happen with laptops that just use a lot of fan to cool down their CPU and the motherboard. Also, I do suggest that you use countdowns, so that could look just like this. Use that in the breaks, use it in anticipation of the class starting, and you can play some music there as well and enhance this. So it goes a long way in really creating classes that are of a higher quality. Next, you'd have hotkeys. I would suggest use OBS's hotkeys. That way you don't have to reach with your mouse and click on changing scenes, but you can do it with a couple of clicks. There was a glitch on my system, so I wasn't able to get that to work on this specific laptop, but they're immensely helpful. And then I'd recommend using, if you have a extra wireless keyboard that has extra keys like F13 through F19 as I do, you could assign them to those. Also, I would suggest to carefully choose backgrounds, and I'll give a note on backgrounds. So for example, here you have this office. Now it looks really quite realistic. I have to say I probably spent a couple hours just searching for the perfect background. Now you could see that there's an end to it, and sometimes there's a difference in color just from the frame to the outside. I aligned the edges with actual cuts that you'd have on these edges, so it looks seamless. One could think potentially a classroom, a blackboard behind me would be the most natural look. It's hard to create that kind of perspective. That's why it is really great if you can have something with a window that you'll see in this video or in Andrew Lowe's video. So do spend time to try to find the right background. It does make a difference, and as you'll see in Andrew Lowe's video, you can have backgrounds that feel more personable. I chose to use the atrium of the Norwegian Business School, BI, Bedriftsinstitutt Høgskolen, for those Norwegians out there, which is what you see behind here. It kind of creates an intimate feeling with the students, making us all feel as if we're almost there in the university. So I use this often. And, I do use slideshows too in OBS. of beautiful places in the country. These are some beautiful places in Norway. This is a scene of Oslo where I teach, and I run that in the background as well. So these are just some suggestions to make your experience better. With that, I'd like to thank you very much. There's lots of people who have helped me. I have to give a big shout out to the university that gave me a visiting room and office temporarily during these times, and that's the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. Thank you, and hope you have a lot of fun and get to engage with your students online, and we could all have better experiences. I wait for the day that I could go and stand in front of my classroom physically, because there's almost no better classroom experience than the real one. Have a great one.